be recorded as well.
Okay,
I'm
recording.
let's do that. Perfect. So today we have Mark Edwards. Mark has over 30 years of investment management experience. He spent 11 years at the Minnesota State Board of Investment, where he managed internal equities and oversaw the trading desk. He spent the next 20 years as a managing partner at the Plexus Group, where he consulted with mutual funds, money managers, brokers, and pension funds on process management, quantitative management, and trading. He's written numerous articles for both the Journal of Portfolio Management and for the Financial Analyst Journal, and he is one of our most favorite professors here at Cal Lutheran. So with that, Mark, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Greg. Last week, we discussed the cost of claiming Social Security benefits before people reach full retirement age. So just as a reminder, when you get your Social Security statement, oftentimes you will see an amount that's given, and it will say at FRA or full retirement age. So all that means is that when you hit that magic age, right now it's 66, and by 1960 it's going to move up over the next 5 years, over the next 6 years, 2 months at a time, so that by the time we get to somebody who was born in 1960, their full retirement age will be 67. So we commonly use the term FRA, or full retirement age. So we talked about that. Now the typical focus is often on the individual's impact of when they claim for Social Security. That's the primary person. But more important is to understand the implications for couples. So as I said, last week I talked about what the cost is of claiming early for the couple. Today, I'm going to talk about why do people make these suboptimal choices? And then we're going to take a look at some of these reasons in greater depth. And then at the end, I want to give a few recommendations on what you can do to help your clients. So as kind of a summary, if you take a look at the summary to begin with, at the top, what you'll notice is that I have kind of a disclaimer that says the benefit discount or premium is determined by the number of months before or after the full retirement age. But everything that I typically will talk about is going to be in years, and that just makes it easier to understand. But in reality, let's assume that, you know, if you claim a year early, you're going to get a discount from that stated that stated amount that you would get each month. You would get a discount of 6.7%. But if you file and claim a half a year early, then it's going to be 3.35%. If you filed 3 months early, it would be minus 1.67. So you get this idea that they really are careful about which month that you file in. But like I said, we'll stick to years. And so the summary was we have some negatives and we have some positives. The negative is that when you file before the full retirement age, you get a reduction. And even more is the reduction that happens if you have a spouse that is going to benefit with you. One of the rules is that at full retirement age, if you and your spouse have both filed at full retirement age, your spouse is then entitled to the greater of their own benefit or 50% of the primary's benefit. But for every, again, year that spouse files ahead of time, their benefit, that spouse benefit, is reduced by 8 percentage points. So on the plus side, if you delay, then your benefits will rise each year after you delay versus the full retirement age up to age 70. So right now, if you delay, you can get up to 32% more if you wait till 70 to claim. If you are born in 1960 and you wait till you turn 70, you will still get 24% more than you would from that stated amount on your Social Security statement. And then you get a couple more, another negative, that the combined couple's benefit drops even more because it's a negative on top of a negative. And the flip side, and I'm going to talk about this in a couple minutes, is that the surviving spouse, and I'll explain what that means, their benefit is going to be significantly enhanced if the primary earner delays claiming. And that's very important with respect to preventing poverty as couples go into old age. So, given some of these issues, what we see is when people file for retirement benefits, they file at two real ages. We call these the anchor ages. The first is 62. This is the first year that people can file. So as you can see, it's automatic. Oh, I can file for Social Security, ergo I am going to. And the other anchor seems to be this 66. Okay, when people tend to actually retire, and this is that full retirement age, people again prefer to retire at that point. Now again, remember, I said that if you delay, you can get 8 percentage points more. So if I waited from 66 to 67, I'd get 108% of my benefit. If I waited for 2 years, I'd get 116% of my benefit, up to 32% right now. Yet what you see is that less than 10% of people still file. You know, that's a pretty attractive return. So the question is, why do people still file early? And there are a variety of reasons. Some of these were discussed in a couple of different articles. One that I took from was in the Journal of Financial Planning last year. So the primary reason that people claim early is because of poor health, lack of liquidity, or forced retirement. This is the bulk of the public, but this is not going to be typical of your client. So let's focus more on your clients. When do your clients tend to, why will they file early? Well, the first is going to be that retirement anchor. Again, we're taught to believe that we should retire, maybe when we get to 65 is when we file for Medicare, or 66, the full retirement age, or maybe even 62. These seem to be just kind of these anchors. I'm going to retire, or at least I'm going to file for Social Security. And we lock these in our minds. We also get pressure from our friends. We call this the peer pressure, or people claim that they hear the same thing from their financial advisors. Those are not advisors that I hope that are emblematic of our students. There's also a lot of confusion with respect to Social Security benefit documents. Again, because the document will show 62 and full retirement age. And it really doesn't go into great depth about the other alternatives with respect to when people can claim. And the last item, a change in the file suspend rules. Simply what this means is that a couple years ago, there was a change that the Social Security Administration made that said that spouses cannot collect spousal benefits. They can collect on their own Social Security payments, but they cannot collect spousal benefits until the primary claimant files. Okay, so in the old days, I could have filed and then suspended my benefits, and yet my spouse could have still picked up 50% of my benefits while I waited. That no longer exists. So now my spouse would have to wait till whenever I claim. And there's opportunity costs involved with that, so people don't want to do it again. Another is the unfamiliarity with the claiming age rules. So one of the things that people have responded is that yes, they kind of understand that there's a reduction if they file early, but very few people understand that if they delay until 70, they can get increasingly higher returns each year for doing it. They just don't know any better, okay? Another is the annuity puzzle. I'm going to talk about this at greater depth in a minute. So the last is this fear that benefits will be cut. And I hear this even often from my own students, that they're worried about that very issue. We've played this game a couple times in the past that I've gone through, where Congress at the last moment has done the right thing and made sure that Social Security is once again funded, and we're doing it now. But it seems to be a popular theme, especially with a press that is mostly younger people who've not gone through this dance before. Now, the cliff is in 2034 when supposedly Social Security runs out of money, or this is how it's always portrayed. Well, it doesn't run out of money. It just isn't going to be able to keep growing. But more importantly, in the House, there's already discussions and proposals that have been put forward that's going to address the funding shortfall at least through 2075 or perhaps to even the end of the century. So I think that that's a fear that's going to be minimized in the next few years. So let's talk about that annuity puzzle for a few minutes. So the first question is, what is this? And why does it exist? Well, the annuity puzzle, an annuity is a guaranteed amount of money that you will receive. It's a guaranteed return on your money. And what's kind of great about an annuity is we have this thing called mortality credits. And that says if I get a large pool of people and they all put money in, then I'm going to be able to allocate from that pool, the earnings from that pool, I will allocate until the last person is alive. Okay? So at the end of the day, those people who die early are in essence funding the people who continue to live a long time. And the way it just works out, the earnings for those people each year is going to be higher than you could receive in bonds because it's just fully funded up front, and because there's going to be a certain number of people who just aren't going to live to be past some median point by definition. Okay? So I will talk about that issue because in theory we have something called a certainty equivalence, which says that when you have a guaranteed return that's higher than most things that you could earn on yourself, that should be really attractive. But people tend to fear that risk of mortality. People don't like to think about death. In fact, there was a letter to the editor in the LA Times a year ago by somebody who said you should always collect at 62 because, and this is salience, this was a very emotional thing, one of his good friends died at 68 before ever claiming Social Security, so he never got the benefit. Ergo, everybody should file at 62, was this person's reasoning. And oftentimes that becomes the logic that people will use. Another is, we call it hyperbolic discounting or the present bias, which basically means nothing more than we overvalue a dollar today versus tomorrow. Okay. Another becomes this loss of the bequest. It assumes that, you know, if I put all my money into an annuity, or in the case of Social Security, if I delay putting money, you know, taking out Social Security and I'm funding out of my own savings, I'm not going to have that to be able to have a bequest. Well, in reality, if you live long enough and you have too low a Social Security, you're going to be tapping into the kids anyway. So that argument kind of goes away. And the last becomes this DIY. This makes the assumption that if I start collecting on my Social Security early on and I invest the difference myself, I can do much better. Well, the reality is very few people, A, remember they don't understand the rules of Social Security or the amount that they can receive, and B, everybody's assumptions of how much they can get for their returns is always overly optimistic. We call that the overconfidence bias. So that kind of starts to look at the annuity puzzle. So let's take a look at that question of mortality and I'm not going to collect. All this table does is it shows if I start collecting at 62, and my example is always, you know, if I can receive $2,500 a year, then after all of the reductions, if I start to file, if I file at 62, and I start collecting, by 63, I'll have received 42,000. By 67, for retirement age, for the new generation, I'll have received $126,000. But if I wait until 67 to file, I only have $30,000. So it's this difference. This is kind of a hole in the plan, or at least in people's perceptions, that opportunity cost that people are afraid they're going to walk away from. So what I did was take a look at a break-even table for these delays. So the first was to say, if I were to delay until 67, how long would it take after 67 before the difference of what I would collect would make up for the opportunity costs? So if I wait till I'm 67 or to 67 to start drawing, then by the time I am 77, 78, 79, 80, by the time I'm 80 years old, I will have already started to receive more money than I would have if I filed at 62. So that's all this really says. This is, now, how long will it take if I delay till I'm 70? And that means I would have to wait till I am 70 plus 14 years, so 84 and a half. Again, I would start to get more money, or I will have accumulated more money than if I'd started collecting at 62. I've done the same math for looking at a couple, remember, because you have the spouse and the primary. And here, the break-even is even shorter. So if I were, as a couple, if the primary gets to age 76, 77, then they will have broken even. Now, the break-even is much later with respect to couples. And the reason for that is if you delay, the spousal benefit doesn't increase after full retirement age. It only grows by the COLA. So that kind of takes away part of that advantage of delaying as a couple, at least if you think of it from the perspective of just the primary and the spouse. But there is something else going on here, and I'm going to address that problem. So the first thing that we think about is, what are your odds of living until you're 80? Okay. Now, everybody talks about this from the perspective of the mean age. Now, this is a difference between mean and median. So if you're thinking about the mean age of somebody who is 65, a woman, the mean is that she's going to die within 20, and on average in 20 years. Now the reason is because you have this skewness. And anytime you have data that's skewed in this direction, that means that the mean is going to be pulled to the left of the median. And if you remember your statistics, the median is that point where 50% of the people will have died already, and 50% of the people are waiting to die at some point in the future. You can see this cliff that drops off. But what this really means is that the median for your clients, if your clients get to be 60 to 65, then that median age, that point where 50% of your clients are going to make it to 90. Okay, that's almost 5 years longer than that mean. And it gives you this idea that when we're talking about a break-even age of 80, okay, then we're missing a good 10 years of true life expectancy. Now, this is another way of looking at it that was provided by Wade Pfau at the American University. And Wade points out, again, from the data of actuarial mortality tables, that a man of 65, the median age for that man of mortality is going to be just about 89 years old. And a 65-year-old woman is expected again to live till after 90. Now, the other that they found is that couples tend to have longer, more longevity than single people. So the last to die, or the second to die in a couple, they tend to live till after 94 as a median. That means 50% of that second person to die is going to live past 94 and a half. Okay? And as you would expect, over time, then that median age rises. And what's important is look at this age of 80. I'm going to talk about this for a second. At the age of 80, the second to die is, 50% of those people are going to live past 95. Okay? So, is the mortality fear justified? Not according to the data. Okay? 65-year-old man is going to live between 88 and 89. 65-year-old woman should live till she's 91. A 65-year-old woman has an 18% chance of living past 95. Okay? And what we get, again, is we look at these break-even ages that I showed a couple slides ago. For the primary, if they wait and claim at 67, they break even at 80. If they wait till 70, it's at 82. Now it says that for a couple, if they wait until 70, they have to wait till they're 89. But as I said, that's not quite right, because we've got survivor benefits. What a survivor benefit says is that the higher of the survivor's own benefit or the benefit of the deceased is what they can get at that time of death. Okay? So what this really means is if the deceased is the primary, then the spouse steps up to the primary's amount, benefit amount. So let's take the case of the primary, and let's say, again, same PIA of $2,500 a month. So let's say that the primary is 80 when primary dies. He lost that lottery. Okay. At 80, if primary had filed at 62, and if the COLA was only 2%, which it has been the last couple of years, then primary would be receiving about $30,000. But if primary had delayed till 70, then the primary benefit would be $53,000. Now, $30,000 versus $53,000, right there, you start to see, oh, there's something more that I have to think about with respect to couples. Especially the fact that you're not going to be having, that full couples benefit. That drop to $53,000 is a whole lot easier to take then. And again, if we assume that couple, the second to survive, is going to make it till 95, from 80 to 95, another 15 years, you can see just how much greater it means, that impact to the total number of benefits or the total dollars over time. The other element that we have is a thing called hyperbolic discounting. What hyperbolic discounting means is that we tend to discount over time the value of things the longer we have to wait. I mean, that's the whole idea of time value of money and present value. Then we discount everything and we bring it back to today's value. And that's what the dark line is for. But this sort of pinkish line is something quite different. This is hyperbolic discounting. And what it says is that, it's like the old bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. It says that right now, today, or, we can think of this as within these first few months of retirement, because that whole idea of retiring is emotional. So people aren't always thinking really well at that point anyway. So what they're going to say is, I've got this benefit today, and it's going to be worth a lot. So in this hyperbolic discounting idea, it says, I would prefer if you give me $1 today, versus if you promised me $3 in a month. I value that dollar right now a whole lot more. But if you gave me that choice in a couple months between getting $3.50 or getting $3 in 1 month, I can wait another 2 months to get $3.50 instead of $3. So you can see how that relationship starts to change over time. In essence, what it really says is that people are going to be very rational when you're discussing their Social Security with them 5 years ahead of time. Then they're somewhere out in here, and they can take a look at very good choices, and they'll tell that to you. But when they get to that point of retiring, then they're going to say, wait a minute. I'm changing my equations. I want to claim now because of, and they will start to rationalize all of these arguments of why they really think they need to claim today. And that becomes part of that problem of how we need to address this. And I'll talk about that at the end. The other issue about DIY investing, the fact that I can outperform the Social Security. So what I did was a little thought experiment to say, can people really outperform the benefit of delaying Social Security? So I took every year of, okay, how much is the discount or the premium of waiting? Okay, so if you waited after 62 to 63, okay, how much is the discount, or how much more can you get at 63? How much more can you get at 64, 65? So I took that percentage and then I divided it by 0.85 because, for our clients, their Social Security will be taxed at roughly 85%. So that increases kind of that investing hurdle rate. So for the primary person only, you can see that that gets pretty high. It's usually in the plus 7.5% range. And then at 67, it jumps up. There's a kink in the curve. So if you wait after full retirement age and you file each year after that, you get even a higher return than that discount if you file too early. If I take a look and do the same experiment with primary and spouse, since both benefit from delays, again, you see it's fairly high. So the question is, do you think you can really earn this amount on a consistent year-to-year basis? That's what you would have to ask your clients. Now, I think you'd be very hard-pressed to be able to match these rates of return each year that would justify taking their Social Security early. So how can we help our clients? Well, this is something that I think about and I talk about in financial behavior. Michael Pompian has done a lot of work on helping your clients to overcome their own biases or their own perceptions. And he has two primary principles. And I think these principles are pretty good about reflecting the bulk of our clients. One is that you can moderate biases in the less wealthy clients. This is the mass affluent. And this is really people who have net wealth under $5 million. We're still the mass affluent, at the end of the day. So you have to adapt to the very wealthy's biases. You're not going to be able to make them change because they're already wealthy. They don't care, okay? But you can moderate the biases for the affluent, and you can also moderate what we call cognitive biases. These are misperceptions of thinking as opposed to emotional biases, things that are gut biases. Those are very hard to change, but when it's cognitive, as most of the issues are with respect to Social Security claiming, they really boil down to cognitive issues. We can adjust them. So how can you help your client? What's most important is to know the rules. You're the advisor. So there's so many choices, especially when you get to retirement, that your client has to think about. Again, this is an emotional time for clients, so you need to guide them. So discuss the Social Security documents ahead of retirement. There's no problem with discussing them 5 years ahead, but it's really important to focus within the first 6 months before they retire through that whole period after, because we find that typically people who haven't claimed yet at retirement do file within the first 6 months after claiming, okay, or after retiring. So you have to really help them to understand these differences. You have to show them the impact on their cash flows and on their budgets, the plan of delaying. Help them to understand and appreciate those returns that I just showed before that you can earn by delaying. This isn't something that the client doesn't have to do. Those are the bogey rates of what the client will benefit from versus trying to invest their own money. Then you have to help guide them, build in the sources to help them to understand how to fund that gap, okay? For some people who have less money, but they might have their wealth in their house, then of course you can use a reverse mortgage. For the bulk of us, we can rely and take some of the money out of our qualified plans. And you know what? That helps at the end of the day because it's going to reduce the required minimum distributions once the client is at 70. And of course, remember those RMDs are going to be taxed at full rate. So you can actually help guide with respect to tax efficiency to pull some of that money out ahead of the time when you have to take RMDs and fund the delay in Social Security planning or Social Security claiming. And most important, become fluent in the language of longevity. As I said before, most people don't have a clue how long they're going to live after they retire, after 65. And while everybody thinks or believes that they might live to 100, they plan as if they're going to die by the time they're 70, 75. So disabuse them of that idea. You have to guide them to making plans that reflect the long game. And at the end of the day, that's what's most important. And when we're talking about couples, really it's all about framing. When you talk to the primary and you tell them this is the impact on spouse and what the spousal benefits are going to be, survival benefits in the long run, that really does help alter their strategy once they've hit retirement age. So you need to make sure you can reinforce some of these issues with respect to guiding your client. Okay, and I showed this in the last slide or the last webinar, and I'm going to keep this up as well. These are some pretty good sources for understanding your Social Security strategies that you can go to. I think that some of the best ones are the ones down here below AARP, but AARP is kind of there. It's kind of a guide for everybody. So that's the webinar today. I'm open to any questions.
All right, thank you, Mark. This is Cindy, and I'm just, I don't really have any questions. I was trying to think of as I went along, but it all makes sense. What I found was really interesting is, you know, you talked about people's biases and stuff and bringing that into it. And my first thought was how you have to really know your client and have an understanding of your client so that you know what biases they may have, and that's what a good financial planner does. So
yeah, that's always the first rule of any business like this, is to know your client. In fact, that is a requirement of being a good fiduciary.
I want to open the table to anybody else who's here who might have questions.
Mark, I think, Cindy, what came to mind was, a lot of times when I listen to these, either lectures, or I'm preparing a lecture, or I'm listening to someone, I think about where I am with 4 kiddos getting ready to go off to college within the next 4 years. And I feel like this is a great conversation to have from a behavioral finance point of view during that sort of second, quote unquote, 8,000 hours of living for folks who are in their 40s. It seems like it might be too early to really talk about the nuts and bolts of Social Security, but if you find you're in that zone where you are spending, right? And then you get to the point where, okay, now it's time to try to amass wealth for retirement. It can kind of change the perspective or the mindset in terms of, yes, I'm spending, but look at this opportunity to grow my quote unquote annuitized Social Security funds at 8% per year if I can just hold out to 70. Do you understand what I'm saying? Because you can get into that mindset where I'm spending, and I'm anxious about, well, when are we going to get an opportunity to save for retirement? And this is sort of like one of those little crowns jewels you can put in the bucket for yourself, knowing that my timeline is 70 and that's what I'm going to be working for, and look at how it's growing. Look at what opportunity I give to myself. So it can kind of change the behavioral aspect. What do you think?
Well, I think that becomes the key, it's that behavioral, and that's why I talked about the anchoring, where people will say today, when they're 51, I can wait till I'm 70. Well, when you start to get into your mid-60s, you may have a completely different perception. And you're going to need, especially when you see people around you who are peers who have retired. So you have to put everything into the idea of, okay, how am I going to do this? And, continue to be able to do this. And that's where, job sharing, working part-time, things that you don't earn as much as you have been earning, but you might earn enough to still be able to delay claiming and where it's important. And I think you made another important point by indicating, when you're starting to think about these things for yourself. And this addresses Brett's issue about people who claim early because they don't want to use up their own money. Okay, again, this goes back to that opportunity cost. If I don't claim and I have to take out my own money, okay, then that's what I'm worried about, because it's going to eat into the bequest, the potential bequest down the road, because I'm assuming that I want to leave a maximum of my bequest. Well, like I said, if you live till normal mortality, the true mortality, 50%, the median, well, if you've got a very low Social Security benefit and you're having to use whatever you have for your own resources, and you have that mindset to begin with, then you probably will have run out of money by that point that you hit that median point. I did that exercise for myself recently, and I was thinking, okay, do I wait till I'm 68, 69, or 70? And when I put pencil to paper and I started to take a look at taking money out of my own qualified plan and using that to fund the difference of what I would have started to receive at various ages for Social Security, it became a no-brainer. The present value of delaying kind of just said, hey, don't be stupid. It's okay to use money from the qualified plan before that, because I am not, I've got a lot of experience. I can't make that 9–10% guaranteed every year. It ain't going to happen. And I don't think many people are going to be able to do that. Any other questions?
Sandy, do you have any questions for us?
I do have.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
All right.
I I have two more just quick questions. I don't want to delay us too long, but just two more ideas. You know, one of the things I also thought about was this whole idea of, you know, the better health, better access to healthcare. Folks typically, if they stay in the workforce, at least what I've noticed, they tend, and for many people, it tends to sort of increase their longevity because they're staying active. They may not be doing what they've been doing, you know, for the past 30 years or so, but if you're talking about staying in whatever you're doing because you're enjoying life and you enjoy using your brain, or you enjoy using, you know, a skill set that you haven't over the past few years, you're going to probably tend to live longer just in general. And so overall, you have both the 8% increase in the value of whatever you're going to receive from Social Security, plus better life satisfaction. It sort of feeds on itself, and that you'll live longer. I mean, eventually you're going to want to sit back and just fish, probably, but that could be another possible way to make the case. But then also what I'd like to would like to ask you if you have any comments on are this whole idea of this FIRE process, where you have young people who will want to make as much as they can now, be frugal, and then retire early. Is that going to affect what claiming will look like later, do you think?
Okay, to address the first issue, studies show on a very consistent basis that the number one thing that a person can do to keep them alive longer is active social engagement. That even exceeds exercise. Is the more social, the more friends they have, the more social contacts they have, the healthier they're going to be. Sanus salus. And I think work for a lot of us was our primary social meeting place. So even when you do retire, the more you can get people to keep an active social life, the better off you are. So, you know, go fishing, but go fishing with a friend, not alone. Thank you, Brett. The FIRE movement, I think at this point, it's the sort of thing that the media has misunderstood, because they're, again, looking at the drama of what these young people are doing today. But what's important is that the young people, they're not walking away. They're not Henry Thoreau walking off to live on Walden Pond off nothing. What they are doing is they are changing careers and doing something that they want to do. And they put away enough money that will allow them to change their career and live a life worth living. So it's not that they're going to leave the workforce altogether. So I don't think that it does anything to really alter the calculus of the Social Security plan. The bigger thing that I think would be a concern would be just the fact that we have fewer and fewer children, which became, Rob Arnott 10 years ago was writing about the need to actually increase the immigration, because how else are we going to fund all of the issues that we need to for an aging baby boomer population? I think that's a far more important thing that we need to consider as we move forward. Okay?
Thank you, Mark.
All right. So I'm going to move us forward.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Mark, for all your time today, and thank you for everyone who participated. Real quick, before we get out of here, I just wanted to talk about thank Cal Lutheran again. And if you enjoyed today's topic or have any interest in the financial planning profession, we have currently at Cal Lutheran 2 different financial planning kind of degrees. We have the MBA in financial planning, which provides business and practice management skills for the working professional. We also have an MS in financial planning, which focuses on the art and science of financial planning and client communication. If you're interested in either one of these programs, please feel free to reach out to our program director, Dr. Chen, or our financial planning manager, Cindy Grethler, who's here today, with any questions. You can also follow that link below, which will take you directly to our webpage. Thank you again to everyone. And with that, we'll conclude our 4th Financial Planning Forum series.